Welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. We are here in the studio, which is the basement. So I don't know if you want me to do a tap dance and sing. I just looked at my analytics for the first time in several months. I should be paying attention to them daily. And over 50% of my audience disappear after the first 30 seconds. So what? Am I not entertaining you enough or what? Hello, everybody. Latter Daily Digest. Tim Rathbone. Good to see you. Hit the like button and subscribe. Yes, hit the notification button. Be sure and leave some comments. Good to see all of you tonight. Doug Vincent, how you doing? What's up? We're going to talk about Dan McClellan, biblical scholar and of Bible and religion. The good, the bad, and the ugly tonight. I'm going to do like he does. I'm going to show you my t-shirt. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. So that's how that works. No Marvel comic, no DC comic. Hey, Bianca Faschel. Greetings from Ireland. I hope I pronounced your name right. So what I'm going to do tonight, now I've never done it quite this way, so bear with me. I have at least 10 tabs open across the top of this crazy thing. And I'm going to click on each one and do slide it to the section in the video clip that I want to have Dan talk on. And then I will respond to, I forgot my other book. Oh, crap. I'm going to do a BYP on you. Hang on. Now half my audience is going to leave. I'll be right back. I promise. I got to go get my other book I've got to read from. Dang it. I swear I am the only podcaster that does this. That just torched my britches. Welcome back, everybody. BYP. Where did I put my blasted book? That is aggravating. I had my book all set aside, too. Well, I guess I won't read from it. Okay, but it's okay. I've got several video clips. Okay, here we go. That's about the most amateur starting you've ever seen. Hey, Dan Vogel. Welcome. Good to see you. Okay, I have not had three uncles named Dan. Let's get this show on the road. I can't believe. Did I put it back? I really wanted that book. It's okay. It was a Blake Ostler book. Let's get started, shall we? I'm going to critique and review several different video clips that Dan McClellan has had, kind of as an appreciation night of Dan McClellan. Not total worship of him, however, because he is human and he does make mistakes. But he does really good with the Bible. And I really appreciate that because I'm trying to understand more of the Bible. Hey, I actually have been reading in the Book of Mormon again, and I did a short today on the Book of Mormon. Yeah, check that out. No joke. It's pretty cool. It smacks down the living prophet, I'll tell you what. So let's do a share the screen, and we will get on to this. Here we go. Not that one, not that one. Okay. Not does the Quran teach creation ex nihilo. Responding. Where is my responding to claims about my dogmas? Hold on. Yes, that's it. Okay, let me share the video. Responding to claims about my dogmas. Okay, here we go. Let me share this video. Okay, here we go. Here is Brother McClellan. Let's listen for the first minute, shall we?
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a response to one of my videos. As a wannabe Mormon, Dan begins with the dogma that Christ is not God.
So this is obviously a rather awkward ad hominem attack, but it's also trying to eat its cake and have it too. Because this creator is suggesting that I began my research from the dogmatic Mormon position that Jesus is not God, which is flatly false. It's official Mormon doctrine that the Jesus of the New Testament was the great Jehovah of the Old Testament. And my research on Jesus's relationship to God, which I have so far published in 2 different peer-reviewed academic venues, flatly contradicts and denies that. My position is that the New Testament does not identify Jesus as the great Jehovah of the Old Testament, or as I would prefer to put it, the Adonai of the Hebrew Bible. And
now, this is interesting because we know Dan McClellan is Mormon. We also know that the official Mormon doctrine is that Jesus Christ is Jehovah. Now, I just recently did a video on this subject, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. Actually, it was a live where I discussed this particular issue on Jehovah being God the Father, and the confusion came about because of the way Joseph Smith adapted the Protestant readings of the Bible in his day. No, shocking to Mormons, he did not automatically receive all of the correct doctrine in his first vision and smooth sailing about which God was who, where, when, and how, and why at all. In fact, astonishingly enough, they have still not figured it out to this day, even though they have streamlined it, and they'll kick your sorry butt out with a membership love court if you disagree with that doctrine. But Dan does not mix his religion with his academia. His academics one thing, his religion is another. So there's that. So let's move on to the second part of this that I wanted to share. It is right here at, bring it up to here. Here we go. Very interesting. So this is one reason perhaps why he does compartmentalize the religious dogma from the scholarly dogma, or scholarly data. Watch it, pal. So no video. You can't see it? Oh, for the love of San Pete. Hold on. Can you see it now? Yeah, I'll rewind and try again. Can you see it now? Let me know. There it is, and I'm going to turn it on, and then I'll come back. Yes, okay, we can see it now. Okay, I apologize. Here we go. Let's start over, and we'll do it again.
Hey, everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a response to one of my videos.
As a wannabe Mormon, Dan begins with the dogma that Christ is not God.
So this is obviously a rather awkward ad hominem attack, but it's also trying to eat its cake and have it too. Because this creator is suggesting that I began my research from the dogmatic Mormon position that Jesus is not God, which is flatly false. It's official Mormon doctrine that the Jesus of the New Testament was the great Jehovah of the Old Testament. And my research on Jesus's relationship to God, which I have so far published in 2 different peer-reviewed academic venues, flatly contradicts and denies that. My position is that the New Testament does not identify Jesus as the great Jehovah of the Old Testament, or as I would prefer to put it, the Adonai of the Hebrew Bible. And this creator seems to know this because someone commented that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to share with. That's what I shared with you the first time, and then I said, And then I said, yes, that is what I made a video of 3 weeks ago, is Jesus is not Jehovah. In early Mormonism, Jehovah is God the Father. So, yeah. And then let me add this screen again. Okay. Can you see the screen again? Can you see Dan again? Let me know real quick, and then I'll quit asking you. I'm going to get to the second part of this. Perfect. Okay, good. Okay, we're good. Okay, so now let me get into this second part. This second part is important. And this is one of the things I actually do like about Dan, is I have not seen anyone do this as well as Dan does. And it is very much appreciated because he's not mucking it up, mixing it with the water of Mormonism and the oil of academia.
But the reality is, the thing that I have consistently and repeatedly asserted and demonstrated across the life of my channel, my personal religious beliefs play no role in my academic positions. I have demonstrated that repeatedly and consistently over the last 3+ years. And this notion that I am both influenced by Mormon dogmas while also directly contradicting Mormon dogmas is pretty laughable rhetoric.
Then he goes about trying to find a way to
Hey,
demonstrate
hold
that his
on,
dogma
hold
is
on.
not
I'm
impossible.
supposed to stop that here. Okay, let me know. Did you hear that also? Yeah, you did. Okay. Very good. Very good. So this is the way I wanted to start this, because one last item here that I think is really good. Dan, that's the one thing I like about him, is he really doesn't confuse the two. And I'm very appreciative of that, because Mormons have a tendency to Mormonize the Bible, and Dan McClellan says, no, we're going to let the Bible say what it says and mean what it means. That is valuable. To me, that is very valuable in my study of the Bible. That's been my complaint ever since I quit being an apologist, is you've got to quit pretending that everyone had their temple endowment in Solomon's day just because the word temple is there in Israel in Solomon's day. So anyway.
This actually all began with a research project where I was trying to demonstrate that monotheism first pops up in Deutero-Isaiah. And as I was trying to figure this out, I realized that a question I needed to be able to answer was, how did the authors of the Bible understand the concept of a God? And I couldn't find a satisfactory answer. So I brought cognitive linguistics to bear on the question, and that bore some fruit. And then I brought the cognitive science of religion to bear on the question, and that just made things a lot more complex, but also a lot more fascinating. And I began to wonder about divine images and how they could be represented as both the deity and not the deity at the same time. This is a big question in the study of deity and divine agency in ancient Israel, as well as in the rest of ancient Southwest Asia. And as I was exploring this, I found that the cognitive science of religion provides a very robust explanation for the intuitive foundation for this perception of divine images as both the deity and not the deity. And
okay, I want to break in here. I'm not done with this particular clip yet, but understand something. Are you still being able to hear him? I'm telling you, McClellan has an exquisite point here that he's about to make. I have never quite actually thought of it quite the way he puts it, and I'm very appreciative of this aspect of his biblical knowledge without getting into the woo-woo theology of Mormonism, right? So this is exquisite. It's a couple more minutes long, and it's well worth the listening.
at that point, I realized, hey, this might also explain what's going on with the perception of Jesus as both the deity and not the deity, because you talk about John as if it unilaterally identifies Jesus as God, but it does not. It actually identifies Jesus as both God and not God. For instance, in the intercessory prayer, where Jesus, praying to God the Father, identifies God the Father as the one true God, and then identifies himself as distinct from that one true God, as the one that was sent by that one true God. And while Jesus asserts oneness with the Father in a bunch of different places and ways, that oneness is not exactly clear. And Jesus also repeatedly prays that his followers become one with him in the exact same way that he is one with God. So that raises questions about how Jesus can both be God and not be God. And I realized that the explanatory framework that I had developed for understanding divine images could also illuminate what might have been going on for the early followers of Jesus and for the authors of the New Testament. And so that's where my research came from. That's me following the data where it leads, rather than deciding where I need to end up and then charting a path around the data.
Okay, now I really, really appreciate the aspect of Dan, what he does with this and so many of his other projects. This attitude of he's exploring, he's testing, he's got a question, right? He doesn't immediately turn to what the prophets and apostles said. Now, I'm sure he reads them. He's still Mormon. I get that. But he is exploring the Bible on its terms, right? So he's looking within the text and then other scholarly / scientific literatures on various aspects. This can lead, ironically, in my opinion, this is just BYP thinking, this can actually lead to a more pristine spirituality. Letting the Bible say what it says instead of trying to make it say and mean what your own church's theology says it ought to mean. This is where McClellan shines. Like him or don't, that's not the issue here tonight at all. I'm just appreciating his approach to this. This is the opposite of dogma, and that leads to dead-end arrogance and pride, right? And ignorance. So it's one of the things that puts Dan as a leader in biblical studies on YouTube, in my opinion. And that is high praise for my friend Dan McClellan. Let's go to the next. Let me see if I can get this down here. Okay, I'm going to have to remove this. Oh, I've got to come over here first. Hold on. No, I don't want to add that to the stage. I want to stop the screen. I will try to part 1 of 2. Okay, let me share my screen again. Hang on, I'll be just a little bit rough here tonight. No worries, here we go. Let me know if you can see this also. I do want to start at, yeah, this will work.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. The fit for this video is the McFarlane Spider-Man. Let's take a look at a video.
An affirming pastor. What do you mean when you say affirming? Oh, I don't think being LGBTQ plus is sinful in any way.
All right, let's hear it.
But doesn't the Bible say in Deuteronomy 18:22 that a man laying with a man is an abomination?
No, that verse is about prophets. But yes, that is in Leviticus. So with that being cleared up, let's hear your response.
That we should have little fences on the edges of our roofs, that we should forgive debts every 7 years, but we ignore all of that. Yes, okay, I get it. We don't follow Deuteronomical law.
That's not true. More specifically, we don't follow the ritual or ceremonial laws that were only binding upon ancient Israel.
The Bible recognizes absolutely no such division of laws whatsoever. The idea of ceremonial, moral, and then civil or judicial laws developed after the Bible was complete as a means of rationalizing and authorizing the picking and choosing of which laws early Christians wanted to keep and which laws they wanted to get rid of. And one of the clearest demonstrations that this is a post hoc rationalization is that Christians kept a bunch of ceremonial laws having to do with worship and having nothing to do with morality at all. This is entirely a post-biblical renegotiation.
I absolutely love this because, interestingly enough, you guys, this has relevance to Dallin Oak's talk in the last General Conference just last weekend, where he talks about temporary laws, temporary commandments. Very interesting. Dan really brings this home in a powerful way in this next clip. And I do believe I can go right to it, which is kind of cool. Yes, I can. Let's keep right on trucking.
So again, this notion that there are temporary ceremonial laws and eternal moral laws for all people and all time is a post-biblical innovation. It is not found anywhere in the Bible, and it also directly contradicts the reasoning that Leviticus 18 itself gives for this particular set of laws. If you go look in Leviticus 18 verses 24 through 30, it explains why these laws are here. This is part of the holiness code. This is about the people of Israel being holy so the land can be holy for two things: so that they can remain dwelling in the land, and so that Adonai can be with them in the land. And if you go to verse 24, it says, "Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, for by all these practices the nations I am casting out before you have defiled themselves." The idea is that these actions generate a kind of metaphysical contamination or pollutant that gets on the people, but more importantly, gets on the land. Thus, the land became defiled, and I punished it for its iniquity, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you shall keep my statutes and my ordinances, and commit none of these abominations, either the native born or the alien who resides among you. For the inhabitants of the land who were before you committed all these abominations, and the land became defiled. Otherwise, the land will vomit you out for defiling it, as it vomited out the nation that was before you. For whoever commits any of these abominations shall be cut off from the people. What is the punishment? You get kicked out of the land. Why? These laws are here to protect the cleanliness of the land and the people inhabiting the land. So keep my charge not to commit any of these abominations that were done before you, and not to defile yourselves by them. I am the Lord your God.
Okay, here's my point in explaining, in showing this part of Dan's video, based on what Dallin Oak said last weekend in conference. We today have a tough time thinking in this manner, the way the ancient Jews did, about the relationship of people and the land. The Hopis, the Navajo, in fact, all of the Native Americans are basically of that same attitude. It's we white and delightsome idiots that don't give a flying flip about our land, and we destroy it, along with the rivers, the waters, the mountains, etc., because we're greedy and we want money, baby. So the parallel in Mormonism here, though, is extremely powerful. The prophet Joseph Smith became war, and I'm glad I've got Dan Vogel in the audience tonight. Hi, Debbie Donovan. Good to see you again. And Kendra. I'm kidding, Kendra. You're not a white idiot. I am. So Dan McClellan's here, and he can verify what I'm about to say, because I get some of these ideas from his book on charisma, his latest contribution to Joseph Smith's studies. The prophet Joseph Smith became warlike, and he didn't keep the commandment to translate only. That was the only gift he was ever given in the revelation to him about that subject. And he was told not to get involved in the world, and the land of Missouri vomited the saints out. They lost their land of inheritance. Here's another example. Joseph in Ohio. He got caught up in scheming the Kirtland Bank issue, you remember. He was scheming with money, and he became more warlike, and Ohio vomited the Mormons out. I get it. It was people. It was the mobs and so on and so forth. But the land did not keep them. In Nauvoo, Joseph Smith entirely got involved with worldly politics. He entirely got sucked into power of office, power in the military. He made a standing army, etc. Gross licentiousness of a perverted sexual polygamous nature, entirely stepping away from the law of God, yet proclaiming it was a revelation. And Nauvoo, Illinois, vomited the saints out. What a parallel. The Mormons are the most abused people in the world from their point of view. From a point of view of the way the relationship of people and lands work from an ancient Israelite perspective, what happened is exactly what should have happened. They did not keep the law of the land nor the law of the Lord, and the land spewed them out. I think that parallel is amazing. What's even more interesting is they're still not keeping the laws in Salt Lake City. Is Utah going to spew them out? Is Mother Nature going to take over? One of the YouTube videos I've seen from one of the Mormons say that one of the general authorities say Utah is going to, Salt Lake City is going to be punished severely because of its wickedness. I mean, a great earthquake in that city would be a horrendous catastrophe. Where would they go? To Missouri, of course, but will the land take them is the question. So this is a fascinating situation. Let me go to this next part here. Oh, hold on. Let me get rid of this one, and then I will be able to, there we go, do this one, part 2 of 2. Okay, here we go. And I've got to share the screen first. Share the screen. Here we go, part 2 of 2. Here we go. Okay, share. And let me make sure I've got it on share. Yes, I do. Part 2 of 2. Okay, on this one, I'm going to just do the first. Okay. My honest suspicion is that this is why Mormons have a tough time with Dan McClellan, because he also says the same thing about Mormonism. He doesn't just say this about the Christians, but what he's about to say is extremely disturbing to the Mormon apologists. And that's why I like it. Sorry, I can't help it, man. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Why is that freezing? Thank you for letting me know. Let me try this again. I will try to Stop screen. Let me reshare the screen. I hope this thing doesn't give me headaches all night. Part 2 of 2, responding. Share. Let's make sure it shares. Were you able to hear it, or was it just that you couldn't see the video playing? Because if you can hear it, I don't know if it's important for the video to be playing. Anyway, here we go. Let me try it again.
Reject the rest of Paul's sexual ethics. So they're picking and choosing which aspects of Paul's sexual ethic to keep and to get rid of, just like they pick and choose which laws from the Hebrew Bible to keep and to get rid of. Because Paul thinks everybody should be celibate, that's the higher law, that's better. The overwhelming majority of Christians today just flatly reject that. And what's Paul's reasoning for this? Well, it's based on a pretty conservative Greek philosophical notion that sexual desire is a product of the baser, corrupt flesh, and so is bad, should be kept under tight control. And Paul agrees with this. Paul has no concern for procreation because he thinks Jesus is coming back too soon for that to matter anyway. So procreation isn't on the table for Paul. For Paul, sex should only be engaged in by married couples if they cannot hack celibacy. And if they cannot hack celibacy, it's better for them to marry than to burn. And the idea here is to burn with sexual desire. In other words, you don't want your sexual desire to boil over, because then it could result in fornication. And so it's better to get married so that you can curate that sexual desire. You can have occasional prophylactic sex that is without the passion of desire, which is for the dirty, dirty Gentiles anyway, so that you can keep the sexual desire under control. And here we have a problem. Why must heterosexual desire be satisfied and homosexual desire be entirely denied, causing that desire to boil over? They both come from the same place, but Paul didn't know this. Paul thought that homosexual desire was entirely distinct from heterosexual desire. So already, Paul's notion of human sexuality is wrong.
Okay, did you get that about Paul? Okay, good. You hear and see. No wonder Mormons really don't like Dan. I get it. But again, the nice thing that I really have appreciated about Dan is his legitimate honesty and quite frankness with the data in the text, as opposed to trying to interweave the Mormon theology or else the Christian theology into the biblical text in order for it to make sense with our own created theology as we cherry pick bits and pieces. That is exactly what Dan McClellan is against. So this is important. Part 2, responding to criticism. Now, this is one of the better ones. I'm going to enjoy this one too. Let me see if I can get this to work accurately this time. Part 2, responding to claims. About affiliation, that's not it. About affiliation. Okay, this one, yes. This is the one I want. Let me, okay, can you see this video? And while I'm at it, let me begin by playing it for the first minute.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. My last video, number McClellan 1928, was part 1 of a 2-part response to a creator who was criticizing my video, number McClellan 1917, about God's Father. Let's get into part 2.
In Exodus 34:6, we also see Adonai declaring the name El once again. But these verses are not alone. As you can see here, Adonai has the same name as El.
So a couple things here. It presupposes univocality to suggest that if you see the equation of Adonai and El anywhere else in the Bible, it means that these other passages must be equating them as well. No, there is a lot of time that is separating these different passages. 2, Genesis 14:20 nowhere mentions Adonai. Genesis 14:22 mentions Adonai, However, we know that's a late addition because we can look in the Genesis Apocryphon from the Dead Sea Scrolls. We can look in the ancient Greek translation of Genesis 14:22, and Adonai's name does not appear at all, which suggests that the Masoretic version that has the Tetragrammaton in that passage is a late change. Somebody is trying to reinforce the identification of El Elyon as Adonai.
And that is really cool and interesting, because what I love, and this is Dan McClellan on his strong point. Now, he does have weak points, but this is one of his strong points. This is one of the things I have so enjoyed about some of his exegesis is simply this. This kind of biblical research is precisely what we're looking for within the Mormon system. And this is what we don't get. That is part of my disgruntle with them. And when you bring it up to them, no, you follow the manual. In fact, they've completely rewritten everything into the rather blasé milquetoast, come follow me tribe. And that's just not attractive personally to me. That doesn't do anything for me. It's continually being whitewashed. That's the problem, in my opinion. This is the disease of Mormonism, this idea of univocality. Now, what is univocality as Dan McClellan presents it? It is simply this, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to explain it using Mormonism because that's the one we're familiar with. The Bible is not univocal. What does that mean? From a Mormon perspective, beginning with Adam, that is the man in Genesis, from the very beginning of humanity, just grant the biblical mythology for a moment. From Adam, all the way up through all of the books of the Torah, the writings, the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the way through Zechariah, Malachi, the 12 minor prophets, up into the intertestamental times, and then, ta-da, into the New Testament. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Acts of the Romans. We get into Paul, we get into Peter, etc. All the way from Adam, all the way to the end of the New Testament, Revelation, the last chapter. Everyone is Mormon. With our current today doctrine and understanding. It's just that the plain and precious parts have been removed, as the Book of Mormon prophesies. So, and of course, from the Mormon viewpoint now, the plain and precious parts are the parts about Mormonism that's out of the Bible. That's why you have the Book of Mormon and the Revelations in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Moses, Book of Abraham, etc., because that is what is being restored. Univocality means when you read about King David, whatever he says of a theological or a doctrinal nature is Mormon doctrine. And he was understanding it as Mormon doctrine. This is fundamentally false. He was an ancient Jew. He did not have Moroni in his mind at all, any more than he knew about Nephi's Tree of Life prophecy, etc., or the doctrine of Mormon polygamy and sealing celestial wives and taking other men's 14-year-old daughters to wife. Neither did Solomon. None of the Old Testament people had the Mormon temple endowment as known today, etc. There are different voices in the Old Testament. This is partly what produces contradictions in the Bible, because there's not a unified, consistent theology in the Old Testament. There's not a unified, consistent historical understanding in the Old Testament. There's not a single, unified, everyone agrees with the doctrines in the Old Testament, etc., etc. It's not univocal. It has myriads of different points of view. That's what Dan McClellan's talking about. This is something that Bruce R. McConkie was fundamentally horrendous with in his commentaries, is everything was Mormonism to him. And unfortunately, so many of the church leaders from Joseph Smith's day on thought the same way. You know, there's a brand new video out, Quick Media. Greg Mattson, nice guy, really nice guy, successful channel. He's giving tours in Egypt with one of the retired BYU scholars now, etc. Quick Media just came out with a video on the endowment of one of the Old Testament people or one of the New Testament people or whatever, the endowment of Abraham or whatever. And all they're doing is they're finding parallels in a ritual, and they're imagining that they had the full-blown endowment as we do. They didn't. That is not what the ancient temples were all about. It's very difficult to say this to Mormons, however, because it's very offensive. They love their dogma, forget the data. Dan McClellan comes along and gives them the data, and they get mad at him. They get mad at me. They get mad at John Dehlin or Radio Free Mormon or Mormonish or Mormon News Roundup or Latter Daily Digest, because we are not letting them Mormonize everything in the ancient world. It just can't work that way. So I just want to make that crystal clear. This is the kind of stuff that makes good scholarship, the way McClellan is handling this at this subject and juncture. So let me get to part, let's see, 116, and I did that. Okay, let me know if you can hear this. Hold on. I see what I did wrong. All right, let me start over. Okay, here we go. Now I will come back here and there. Okay, here we go. Try this one more time.
Adonai.
In Genesis 33:20, we could see that Jacob erected a temple to El. But given the context of the story, we know this is for Adonai.
How do we know that, though? Because the name Adonai doesn't occur anywhere at all in Genesis 33. And scholars identify multiple different literary layers to the broader Jacob cycle. And so in order to argue that, you have to reject the scholarly consensus about the different sources that are being brought together for this story. You have to assert univocality. So it's begging the question.
Now,
okay, there it is. They have to assert univocality, which is the Mormon disease as well. The virus, the disease of, well, when we say the word endowment, the ancient Jews, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the patriarchs, they understood our understanding of the endowment. They did not. That nonsense has got to stop within Mormonism, and we're going to help them do that. So, asserting your own theology onto the ancient biblical record, that's not how to do good scholarship. Let me move on to the next part, which is very, very cool as well. Oh, we're here. Okay.
Six through 7 details of El as a separate God, the actual Most High. But then in verse 39, Adonai has no other gods.
Hold on, I'm taking this back. I saw it wasn't
a question.
Now about the verses in question, Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9. It doesn't make sense to me that we see in verses 6 through 7 details of El as a separate God, the actual Most High. But then in verse 39, Adonai has no other gods beside him, and it is he that has the authority over life and death. It seems to me that in Deuteronomy, it's simply Adonai dividing up the nations to the divine council and allotting his portion, Israel, to himself.
So 3 concerns here. To begin, you do not divide up and then distribute an inheritance to yourself. And verse 8 ends by saying the nations were divided up according to the number of the B'nai Elohim, of the children of God, of the children of Elyon. Whether you identify Elyon with Adonai or not, the number corresponds to the number of their children. And according to the other biblical attestations, as well as broader Northwest Semitic attestations, as at Ugarit and elsewhere, that traditional number of nations is 70. This is what we get in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. This is the idea we see reflected in Greco-Roman period Jewish literature about the 70 nations of the earth and about having guardian angels over them. This is what we see at Ugarit in the designation of the B'nai Elohim as the 70 sons of Athirat. So
this is critical. What we're seeing here, and this I'm very grateful for, this is what biblical scholarship looks like. Not the Bible has a context. The Bible has quite a few contexts, right? There are internal cultural contexts. Then you have to make the concentric ring larger and include the ancient Near Eastern context. That's why he's bringing in these other literatures, this Ugarit culture, etc., their theology, because Israel didn't live in a vacuum. It traded with its neighbors. They had travel back and forth. The Jews went with them. They came to the Jews, etc. The influence was literally back then, as far as they knew, worldwide. And so we see this reflected in the Bible from the ancient Mesopotamian myths, the ancient Babylonian myths, the ancient Egyptian myths and theology, etc. We see it reflected. The Temple of Solomon itself was built by who? A Canaanite, Hiram, right? Of Tyre, Hiram of Tyre, but a Phoenician, I said Canaan, I meant Phoenician. So various cultural contexts. But this is what Mormonism, just for whatever reason, will not do. Now, Hugh Nibley did it decently. He got parallelomaniac with Mormonism, though, and it kind of flubbed up some of his stuff. But this is what biblical study should look like, in my opinion, the way McClellan is bringing all of this out. I appreciate that in him for that. So let's see what else we've got here. He does have some other very good points. I will scoot that back a little.
So 70 is the number, and Israel is one of the 70. So if Elyon is dividing up the nations according to the number of the B'nai Elohim into 70 and then keeping one for themselves, then they're not dividing up the nations according to the number of their children. They're dividing up the nations according to the number of their children plus one. But the text doesn't say that. It is a much simpler conclusion to recognize that this is Elyon dividing up the nations according to the number of their children, among whom is counted Adonai, who receives one of those nations.
Very nice. This is good stuff for this reason. It's not monotheism as well. And this is quite a remarkable thing that offends Christians, and in some respects, Mormons, I don't think, are as affected, but Christians really are. If you're still active in Christianity and you still accept the religion and all, we know that ancient Israel was polytheistic and that it was blessed for that. Interesting. Monotheism is a later development. McClellan is about to show that shortly, but this is a very important lead into helping us understand why 70 nations. Thank you, Kendra. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Why 70 nations, and what are these sons of God, multiple gods, etc. This is the issue. So let's see what else McClellan brings out, and he does this so well. I mean, dang it, I'm green with envy with his power with the Hebrew Bible. When I grow up, I want to be just like this guy.
and 9 seem to be quoted speech from an earlier generation. So verse 7 says, ask your fathers and they will tell you. Ask your elders and they will say, quote. And then we get verses 8 and 9. So it is being presented as coming down to them from an earlier generation. And the generation that is responsible for the rest of the Song of Moses, I argue, is a post-conflation generation. In other words, they already understand Adonai and El to have been conflated, which is why verse 6 talks about Adonai using imagery based on El's conceptualization as the progenitor of humanity. In the broader Northwest Semitic literature, like that of Ugarit and elsewhere, El is the creator of humanity. El is the father of humanity. El is the progenitor of humanity. And additionally, verse 39 doesn't undermine any of this. This is not a monotheistic statement. This is about the exclusive relationship between Adonai and their people. And so it is not saying there's no other God anywhere. It's just saying, as far as you are concerned, Jacob, my people, there is no other God besides me. And that does not undermine the observation that verses 8 and 9 seem to recognize a distinction between Elyon and Adonai. So nothing in the broader Song of Moses context complicates understanding verses 8 and 9 as preserving an earlier distinction between Elyon and Adonai.
Now, Dan.
And that's cool, because what in a nutshell, what Dan is telling this gentleman right here that you see, what Dan is telling this person is, you have to quit reading a later theology back into the earlier materials, because the earlier materials did not understand their theology the way the later ones were. And this, precisely in a nutshell, is my hugest beef with Mormonism. I hate how the church mars and disrespects and craps on the Bible in order to make it unified or univocal, so that you imagine that every word and understanding and meaning you have is what they had in the Old Testament. Nothing can be further from the truth. This is really important to me personally. I've discovered, as I'm reading the Bible again for the first time, to use Marcus Board, reading Jesus again for the first time. Good book, by the way. No kidding. He was good. He didn't give you any of that woo-woo crap either. No, I really appreciate this kind of an analysis where it is a close reading of the text in situ, in the position chronologically, culturally, politically, that it is in at that point in the Old Testament story. This is really important, in my opinion. So thank you to Dan McClellan for doing that. What happens is, when we take a close look at the text in relation to what we read in other discovered texts of the other cultures, which were Israel's neighbors, we get scholarship at its best, which gives us a more accurate interpretation of the historical situation, of the theological situation. It doesn't matter which kind of situation you get. It's a better context that way. And this is vastly superior than the theological dogma that we have been taught. I'm not going to hold back. I rebel against theological dogma of organized religion. I have no need of that. I don't want it. I want to understand, well, I want to understand them on their own terms. Why is that so difficult for the Mormons to let happen? Right? It's just so fascinating. Okay, let's go on to, okay, I'm going to stop this screen and I'm going to try to share the screen again, and we're going to move on to a new one. This one is one of my favorite of all time from Dan McClellan. It probably won't be yours, but it is mine because of how he does this, which is a beautiful thing. I really appreciate him educating this lady. How many of us are in this little gal's position? And I'm not saying little gal demeaningly. To me, I'm 63. To me, this gal is a little young gal. So please forgive me. I'm not trying to be sexist or racist or anything. Boy, you got to be careful these days. You get accused of the most stupid bullshit you can imagine. Here's Dan McClellan, the teacher. I love this. I love how he does this. Okay, yeah, this is the one. This is a cool video.
Makes sense. Today's episode, Genesis chapter 32, verses 22 through 32.
All right, let's see it.
This is the story of Jacob wrestling with God. Now, I had to go all the way back to Genesis 25 to get the context on who Jacob was. And even with the context, I still don't understand why this happened. That's just for those people that are going to be like, well, you're reading it out of context. I read the context, and I still don't know what the fuck is going on.
So Genesis is full of etiologies or origin stories, and that's what this is, an origin story for how we went from a dude named Jacob to a dude named Israel, who is the eponymous ancestor of the land, the people, the nation of Israel. And a lot of what these etiologies are trying to do is tie everything into a single genealogical line, a kind of genealogical taproot of humanity. And we do the same with Esau, who is going to become the eponymous ancestor of the Edomites. And Edom means reddish. It's named after the reddish soil in the area. But in this story, we want Esau to be, one, covered in red hair, and two, to exchange his birthright for a mess of pottage, which in Hebrew is ha'adom ha'adom, a doubling up of the word for red thing. So Esau is basically represented as desperately saying, give me some of that red stuff. And then the verse ends saying, and thus he was called Edom, which means reddish. And so Jacob gets his name changed to Israel. Israel means El contends, but in this story, they understand it to mean fights with God. And so they tell a story of Jacob fighting with God. And it is placed here because this is right before the reconciliation of Jacob and Esau. And it's placed at the Jabbok River because that is the boundary of the land of Israel. So there's a lot of significance to Jacob taking on the name Israel in this place, in this time, and thus becoming the eponymous ancestor of the Israelites.
Now, I really, really like how Dan did this. Sincerely. This was terrific. He even-handedly gave a good explanation of why the story is there. Now, isn't this all of us? You know, there are stuff in the Old Testament and in the Bible that you just kind of balk at. You go, I don't even comprehend what this means. I don't even know why this is told about whoever. And she goes on explaining her issues with this entire story of Jacob being changed to Israel and why he wrestled with God and some of the theological conundrums that this involves. And I love how McClellan just systematically, step by step, in a very professional, not talking down, but just simply explaining as a setup for the people of Israel to have a national consciousness. They put this story in here. Not that it's real history, not that this actually happened, but the story. This is why Joseph Campbell was so valuable to me. We humans love stories. Joseph Campbell shared the mythologies from around the world because they're stories. We learn the best from stories. This is beautiful how he does this. This is one of my favorite videos of all time from McClellan. Oh, do I still have it on? No, I do not. I will add to the stage. Hold on. There we go. I don't want to miss this. So here we go.
Hey everyone, I wanted to tell you about one of the best deals we have going on the internet right now. It's the buy one, get one free deal on our world famous.
Then the man says, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. So the man that he was wrestling with was God?
Yes, Jacob fights with God and seems to win. And that is necessary because this story is only being told as an etiology for the name Israel. And their folk etymology of that name is that it means fights with God. So they've got to tell a story of Jacob fighting with God. Now, this is going to be uncomfortable for some folks. And so there's another reference to this story elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible that actually has God winning. And that's Hosea 12. In verse 4 at the end, it says, Sara'at Elohim, he fought with God. Now, verse 5, as it stands right now, says, Vayasar el Malach. And he persevered to the angel. And this is nonsensical. And so a lot of scholars assert that the preposition el should be al, which means over and against. He persevered against the angel. But then it has Jacob desperately crying out for a blessing. It represents Jacob as losing. What's going on here? Someone has written in the word malach, where the verse originally began Vayasar el. Vayasar el, if you take out the space between Vayasar and el, would just be Vayisrael. God persevered, and thus Jacob is desperately crying out. But when you write in Malach, you not only change it so that it means he persevered to the angel and is thus harmonized with Genesis 32, but you also distance God from this, and you change Jacob's wrestling partner from God to an angel. So that editorial change helped reconcile these two passages and also helps move God out of the equation so that Jacob is only wrestling with an angel.
Good stuff. Look, let's be realistic. McClellan is not the only one who advocates this. And this is the kind of stuff that just drives the inerrantists crazy. We'll let it, because we want to be textually accurate, okay? So we know the text has been changed. Now, I have been sharing Margaret Barker's research with you as well in some of my videos and podcasts. Debbie Donovan and I last week shared more of her Great Lady book materials. She has shown conclusively that texts were changed, which of course changes the meaning, and this is exactly what Dan McClellan is showing. Not that it's a historical change, but it very well could have a theological agenda in the ancient times. This shows once again that not everyone had the same beliefs. You know, we get in a bad habit. We say, well, the ancient Jews believed. Hold on. Well, the ancient Greeks believed. Now, wait, you can't lump sum everybody. The Qumran community Jews who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls did not believe what the Jews in Jerusalem running the temple believed. The Jews who wrote the books of Enoch did not believe either the Qumran Jews' views or those temple Jews in Second Temple Judaism, so on and so forth. So there is not a uni belief any more than there's a univocality in the Old Testament. This is really nice for him to explain that. This scribal activity occurs because we go to the Hebrew. And again, it's my bias, and I suck at Hebrew. I'm working on it. But I really love the fact that some of my very favorite scholars are so willing and able to explicate the Hebrew and the meaning of the Hebrew and the changes in the Hebrew. Tonight I present Dan McClellan. I have also been presenting Margaret Barker. This is how we learn. This is what gives it the spice. Hey, ta-da! I just got a revelation, and I didn't even have to pull out my pen pencil and turn it on like Russ Nelson does. Oh, now it skipped my mind. Holy cow, the devil took it away. The Lord giveth, the devil taketh away. God, that was a cool thought, too. How embarrassing. I get a revelation and blow it by not being able to. Well, that just goes to show you I'm not a true prophet. What was I talking about? Anyway, neither here nor there. I'm blabbing because I'm so excited. Oh, yeah. This is why we go to the Hebrew. And now I've got Dan McClellan going to the Hebrew in a completely different context with a completely different subject than Margaret Barker. But it has been changed because different. Notice that the theology does not remain the same through time either. It does change. It shifts. There's different types of emphasis. Well, I mean, there's evolution in theology in every religion. There's no doubt about that. Of course, Mormonism would say, well, yeah, duh, that is what is called continuing revelation, right? So what's nonsensical in English makes much greater sense in Hebrew. That's my point. Joseph Smith gave them the clue, and they continue to ignore it, much to their loss. Let's see what else we have here that is so fun to listen to.
Jacob asks him, can you just tell me what your name is? And the man replies, why do you want to know my name? And then he blesses Jacob. And it never says where the man went or what happened to him.
This is a story that starts and stops rather abruptly and does not transition smoothly in and out. And some scholars might argue that that is a sign that it has been stitched in secondarily, and other scholars would say this is a rhetorical device that is attention grabbing. So there's not really a clear answer about that, but abrupt starts and stops to stories were not phenomenally uncommon anciently.
What is the story? I have so many questions. Why did God feel the need to take the form of a human and wrestle with Jacob?
This is kind of a standard story in ancient Southwest Asia and in the Bible. Esther Hamori, in her book When Gods Were Men, calls this the Ish Theophany and discusses this story in great detail. I would highly recommend that book if you would like an academic discussion of all of this. But in short, that was necessary to serve the rhetorical needs of this etiology.
And on top.
Now, I promise I'm not worshiping McClellan, because I do disagree with him, and I'm about to show you shortly, and I do disagree with him very strongly on one of his videos. He's dead wrong on that. But right here, I want to stay here focused for just a few minutes. This story, the events portrayed in this story, they may not have happened historically. They do not have to have happened historically to have value. I'll put it that way. See, this is again the truck stuck in the mud in Mormonism. They have so married their theology to history because they have this conception that that is precisely how the ancient Jews intellectually and spiritually functioned, which they did not. But they have so married the scriptures to having to have been literally history that they have far more problems than they ever would if they would just get it right. This story, not being history, is not valueless. It is a tremendous story. It is absolutely critical for the functioning of the nation. Isn't that amazing when you really stop for that ancient nation of Jews? This story is one of their foundation stories. This is big stuff for them, not because it happened, but because it is explaining their grandiose, marvelous origin. Didn't we do that with George Washington? George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, positively evil as a kid, yet he confessed and he repented, etc. George Washington threw a dollar bill over the river and it made it. These type of hero myths, as it were, to build up the founder of a nation so that you can get started on an accurate, powerful, concrete footing. This is human nature. Every nation does this without exception that we're aware of. So this is kind of interesting. It is, their basis, of course, is founded in God. See, this is their religious mythology grounded in that theme. That's what we're looking at here. Okay. When we understand that, the Bible becomes a lot less mysterious and difficult and much more interesting. Not because we have to believe it, not because we have to accept and gain a testimony that this really happened. None of that noise makes any difference to the value of this mythological story at all. I love how McClellan explained that. Let's keep going. There is more to this. And I love this little gal because she's spot on. There are difficulties in this story. How do we handle these difficulties? I love how she's blatant and wide open here. I love that.
To serve the rhetorical needs of this etiology.
And on top of that, here's one verse that I found that was interesting. The man saw that he could not overpower Jacob. The man, who we later find out is God, could not overpower a human?
So the whole purpose is to have Jacob's name changed to Israel, and they decided on a story where God says, you got me, I'm going to change your name to Fights with God.
And if this man is supposed to be God, the God that's supposed to be all-knowing, for one, why would he wrestle with Jacob already knowing that he was going to lose? And for two, why would he ask Jacob his name if he already knew it?
The notion of God as omniscient, as we understand that concept, did not exist in this time period. That would be a much later philosophical innovation.
Bam! You damn right, baby. I mean, that's the point right there. That's it. We have this ridiculous habit of using our beliefs as the basis for judgment of everyone else, regardless of when they lived. And this is causing vastly more problems than it's solving. You can't read your theology into the ancient people. I don't care which culture you have it in either, right? So, you know, the Nephites were the Mayans, the Lamanites are the American Indians, etc. That kind of noise just is not helpful. I love how Dan put that. Our modern notions onto ancient peoples is not working, and it never will. Let's keep going.
And another question. You see how it says your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you struggle with God and with humans and have overcome? They never call him Israel. I went on and read the other chapters. They keep calling him Jacob.
So this etiology for the naming of Jacob is a cue to an audience from much, much later down the road who just needs to see, that's where it happens. Even though the bringing together of all these traditions includes a number of stories afterwards that are still about a dude named Jacob. So it is just being placed in this position for an audience much, much later down the road.
A dude named Jacob. Now, let me add something really cool. Jacob, according to typical biblical chronology, lived about 1800 BC. This entire story, this entire book, was not even written down and compiled, I'm going to say, beginning 600 BC. Well, folks, we're talking 1,200 years later, right? So, of course, they want this later audience to grasp the significance, and so that's why they're creating this story. Not as a recollection of what happened historically. No, to give the people their bearings on who they are, because the chosen people have been decimated. Their temple was destroyed by the frickin' Babylonians. It was burned to the ground. It was destroyed. They were killed by the tens of thousands and taken into captivity. Who are we? Is the national crisis identity question. And when you look at it that way, you say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? That is the purpose of the patriarchal stories. And when you look at it that way, well, the Bible's just a bunch of myths. No kidding. That's exactly what it should be. We have a lot of myths also as Americans. The myth of the westward expansion, Paul Bunyan, etc., Johnny Appleseed. Now, that is based on a historical person. I get that, but I'm just trying to give you some ideas. So this is really interesting. Let's keep going. Fun stuff, in my opinion. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I personally really enjoyed. Oh, we got to wade through another stupid commercial. Sorry.
Auto accidents are just that. Accidents. They hit you out of the blue. Don't let your auto...
And on top of everything else, the biggest question of all is, how is it that Jacob, a mere human, saw the face of God and didn't die? Nothing happened to him. I don't understand. Exodus chapter 33 verse 20 says, you cannot see God's face, for no one may see me and live. And 1 John 4 and 12 says, no one has ever seen God.
So there were different approaches to the visibility of God anciently, and we have different literary layers that have different perspectives on this in the Hebrew Bible. So for instance, in Genesis 18, Abraham is walking and talking with God, and there's no problem at all. There's no reference to the notion that Abraham's life was threatened. We have another literary layer where there is a threat, but there are multiple exceptions to that threat. And we have stories where people see God's face and either express fear or shock that they have survived seeing God's face. So Hagar, we have Gideon, we have Manoach and his wife, we have Moses in Exodus 3. We have a number of examples of this. Still, another literary layer has Moses as the only exception. With any other prophet, I will speak through visions and dreams, but with Moses, I speak face to face, as a man talks with his neighbor. In still another literary tradition, not even Moses gets to be the exception, and that's what we have in Exodus 33:20, where God says, you cannot see my face, because no human can see me and live. And then we get into Greco-Roman period Judaism, and Greek philosophy begins to influence their conceptualization of deity, and we move towards God's hiddenness. And by the time we get to the Gospel of John in the New Testament, John can assert no one has ever seen God. And this is just a change in the conceptualization of God. And when you bring this later idea together with the earlier ideas, there's a contradiction. And I discuss this in much more detail in my video number McClellan 1784.
Superb, superb. This is what we should have been taught in Sunday school. This is what we should have been taught. The church fumbled the football on all of this stuff because she is assuming a univocal, steady, consistent doctrine and ideas and even beliefs. And that is an assumption, not a fact. So we have to test our assumptions, right? This is really critical. So it's the humans changing of the understanding of God, not the reality of God, from their point of view. In the process of trying to understand the ancient Jews, you jump headfirst, both feet, into their culture, their language, their philosophy, their religion, so that you can understand them. And it is an absolutely exquisitely fascinating thing to do. So this is the idea. So again, very much appreciated how McClellan handled that. Here we go.
So did Jacob lie about seeing God face to face? And if he did lie, why is this story in the Bible if it's not true? And if he wasn't lying, he did see God face to face, then those other verses saying that no one has seen God and no one can see God, those are wrong.
And this is one of the reasons that we have no choice but to negotiate with the text if we want it to be authoritative. Those who think of it as inspired are going to think of it as univocal, which means they have to make these differences go away, which requires picking the idea that we want to take priority, and then requires either ignoring, removing entirely, or reinterpreting all those other verses that disagree with the text you have picked as the one that you want to take priority. So that's part of the negotiation process that must go on if you want this text to be univocal, to be inspired, to be inerrant, which are all dogmas that are not supported by any data and are only there because people have decided to impose them.
Oh my gosh. That is the crispest, most straightforward description of Mormonism I have ever heard. That is what turned me off as an apologist with men. Hold on, I gotta shut this off. I can't hear myself think. That is what caused me to quit being an apologist in Mormonism, for that exact reason. Because, well, the text is inspired, therefore, we have to iron out the difficulties, which means manipulating the text. Now, anciently, they manipulated the text. In Jesus's day, they manipulated the text. In medieval times, they manipulated the text. In modern times, they manipulated the text. A nightmare scenario, but it's what it is. It's what we have. That's why I like McClellan's approach best. This is one reason why I can't stomach theology as much as I would like to, or even the literal historical point of view, because that just does not work. So, okay, now I get to the point, and this is the best part of my program. I've got, I'm at an hour and 20 minutes. This is important because I'm going to strongly disagree with McClellan. I'm not going to play through all of both of his clips, but I'm going to leave a description or leave a link in my description of a study you can go to. But here, I believe I catch McClellan in Dogma. The amazing, interesting thing to me is that he has data, but it's incomplete. Based on that incomplete data, no, I mean really incomplete. I know we all can't have the complete data, but in this instance, his incomplete data, I believe, fundamentally makes him dogmatic. He's wrong. That doesn't mar the effect of his presentation. I'll put it this way. He's partially right and mostly wrong. That's how I'll put it. And I've written down how I want to respond so that I respond appropriately, because I love this man. I love his exegesis. I love his biblical knowledge. I just don't accept all of his conclusions based on the data that he uses in a partial sense in this next idea, in this next issue. So here we go. Oh, and hold on, let me stop the screen. And now I will reshare the screen. Yeah, this electronic crap just drives me crazy. Oh, and that's the Quran teaching ex nihilo. Responding. Okay, that one. Yep, that's the one. Okay, here we go. This will be my funnest part of the entire evening, I think. I want to make sure it's up. Yes, sir, it is up. Marvelous. Is this the one? Okay, here we go.
2008, 70 books, or codices, were uncovered in a remote cave in Jordan. The pages are crafted of lead and appear to be almost unreadable, bound together on rings. To an outside observer, they may not look like much, but this was a find that could change the way ancient Christianity is studied, and maybe even how we perceive Jesus Christ himself.
All right, let's see it.
Through rigorous testing, all 70 books were determined to be genuine and date to the 1st century AD, making them around 2,000 years old.
No, initial tests paid for by the con artist who initially publicized them found that the lead could be that old.
The books reference the apostles John, Peter, and James, as well as the earliest mentions of Jesus Christ.
So not a word of this is true because
so far, I absolutely agree with him. This is pure, unadulterated, ridiculous claims of what these lead plates are. But McClellan's conclusions are also wrong. The problem with McClellan on this subject, and it's unfortunate in my opinion, there is a way to correct this, however, is he needs to keep studying. He doesn't know enough yet. And that's ironic coming from a wannabe scholar saying to a scholar, you don't know enough about this subject yet, but it is true. The sensationalists that McClellan is responding to is fun. It gets him views, etc. But deal with the real scholars who are actually continuing to look at this. That's where I stand. That's where I don't think Dan McClellan is going. It's not a crisis. It's just a disagreement. So let's keep going here because this is really interesting stuff, in my opinion.
Because the texts do not say anything at all, because they are pure and utter gibberish, because that's what happens when a forger creates a forgery that has to include ancient texts. They mix up a bunch of different scripts from different languages and different time periods in ways that don't produce any intelligible text. It's very repetitive. There was clearly a stamp that had a single set of lines of text that was repeatedly used on a lot of the codices, and it means nothing.
Now, I made a video supporting this before I got into further studies also. I am now repudiating that video. I know, I get it. McClellan's been on John Dehlin, and he has also teamed up with other scholars on these lead codices. I get all that. I truly do. But there are answers. Now I get to read so that I make sure I get this point across. I agree that the codices do not mention Peter, James, John, or Jesus. These sensationalists are as stupid as the sensational faith-promoting prophet stories that we get out of the current leader of Mormonism. I'll put it that way. And I have just as much disdain for it. You sensationalists, knock it off already, would be my approach. But Dan jumps the gun to say that they are gibberish. And here's why. Just because he can't read them is not proof they are gibberish. They are ciphers and coded. Dan just doesn't have the key to decoding them. Here, he may very well be on the wrong track. Stamping ancient metal is also not proof of forgery. Ancient metal was indeed stamped. What do you think the Bar Kokhba coins are? What do you think some of the ancient coinages, how were they made? So it was done in many ancient cultures. So let's keep going, and I have some further elaboration I will do. This is fun stuff. Okay, let me see. I want to jump up to 208. Yeah, right up to here. Close enough.
Jordan Codices is offered.
Even including a portrait of him. The writings in the codices suggest that Jesus was not beginning a new religion. Rather, he was continuing a 1,000-year.
So I'm going to interrupt the video real quick to point out that that codex that they're panning up in the video right there, that's one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that the Jordan Codices folks are knowingly involved in forgery. And that codex was not released by the Jordan Codices team. They didn't want that to see the light of day. And to know why, you need to know a little history behind this story. See, David Elkington, the con artist in charge of the Jordan Codices team, released a press release on March 31st, 2011, announcing the discovery of these 70 codices that were supposed to date to the 1st century CE. The previous October, he had sent some photos of some codices to an Oxford classicist named Peter Thoneman and asked him to authenticate them for him. And Peter Thoneman wrote back, said, turns out this was really easy. These are modern forgeries of no more than 50 years old. And he said, the text on there is Greek, but whoever wrote it didn't know Greek because they confused the lambda for the alpha. Additionally, the text is cut off in the middle of words on both sides. It's as if someone yanked it out of the context without knowing where the words began or ended. And he also said, I was able to find the source for this text. It's an inscription on a headstone on display in a museum in Amman, Jordan, and it's only been there for less than 50 years. Somebody copied part of the inscription off of that headstone, but didn't capture the whole thing. They began in the middle of words and they ended in the middle of words. And so he pointed out this is very clearly a forgery. David Elkington ignored that and did not release those codices, but released all these others. And so this creator of this video has unknowingly shown the most conclusive evidence that David Elkington, the con artist in charge of the Jordan Codices team, was knowingly engaged in fraud.
These are the earliest known Hebrew Christian documents, which means they could provide valuable information for those practicing Christianity, Islam, or Judaism.
It would be awesome if we found a bunch of texts from that time period, but these are all forgeries.
David Elkington is a complete idiot. He is a forger. He is part of the problem in this whole Jordan Codices. But because of his shenanigans, Dan is jumping the shark by saying all of these codices are forgeries. They may not be. There has been new studies coming out with some remarkably interesting conclusions and studies. So, Elkington and Thoneman, a man named Samuel Zinner has shown how they were wrong as well, but these may not be forgeries. Some codices could be fake. Zinner agrees with that assessment, fundamentally so, but not as all of them, because Zinner has now demonstrated in a huge study, which I will leave in the description to this video, that some of the codices go back to Simon Bar Kokhba's era. They are ciphers. They're coded information. They're not straightforward texts. Not all of the lead codices are forgeries, is Zinner's conclusion. There's more here than meets the eye. Now I want to go to the second video that Dan McClellan was responding to some of the ridiculous, idiotic sensationalists claiming they're Christian proof and all that. That's pure, unadulterated bunk. I'm on McClellan's side there, without question. However, he comes to some erroneous conclusions. And let's get to those. Oh, you know what? I'm going to remove this. No, I'm going to stop the screen. Hold on. Let me share the screen again. Yeah, let's start this fresh. Here we go. Here we go. Respond to the Jordan Codices. Respond to claims about the Jordan Codices. Okay, this one. Yeah, this is the one I want. Oh, nope, that's not the one I want. I want not that one either. There we go. This is the one I want. Hold on. Let me see if I've got this one on the I do not. So remove that. And I will stop screen. Let me try to get this one more time. I got the wrong one. So responding to the Jordan Lead Codices to claims, responding to claims. There we go. That's the one I want. And we've got it right. What is going on? Did I not get this as a... Oh, come on. Hold on. I'll get this. Just bear with me. Well, let me try it. I don't think that's the one I wanted. No, that's the one I want. Responding to the Jordan Lead Codices hoax. Let me stop the screen again, present the screen, share the screen. Okay, responding. Not ex nihilo. This didn't abbreviate that. Doggone it. Responding. There, this one. There. Okay, got it. Okay, here we go. Now let me make sure I'm showing it. Okay, yeah, that's the one. Okay, now. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Nicole Hockley from Sandy Hook Promise. I know this is hard to hear, but it's important.
What? No.
A stamp that had a
Side observer, they may not. 2008, 70 books.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, right here. Let's go.
2008, 70 books, or codices, were uncovered in a remote cave in Jordan. The pages are crafted of lead and appear to be almost unreadable, bound together on rings. To an outside observer, they may not look like much, but this was a find that could change the way ancient Christianity is studied, and maybe even how we perceive Jesus Christ himself.
All right, let's see it.
Through rigorous testing, all 70 books were determined to be genuine and date to the 1st century AD, making them around 2,000 years old.
No, initial tests paid for by the con artist who initially publicized them found that the lead could be that old.
The books reference the apostles John, Peter, and James, as well as the earliest mentions of Jesus Christ.
So not a word of this is true.
Is this the same one I just showed? It is, isn't it? I had the right one after all. I apologize. I've got so many doggone tabs open that I've never done it this way before on a live. So let me get to the other one. Let me see if this one works.
Christianity since the Dead Sea Scrolls.
All right, let's see it.
Yeah, this is the one.
This could be one of the biggest finds for Christianity since the Dead Sea Scrolls.
All right, let's see it.
So a few years ago, archaeologists were studying this cave in a remote part of Jordan where Christian refugees were known to have fled after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, when they uncovered this collection of 70 tiny books made of lead and copper. Now,
so this is false. These codices were absolutely not discovered by archaeologists. They were brought to a man named David Elkington, who then published a press release in 2011 announcing the discovery of these codices. He was not there wherever they were discovered, and the story about where they came from and how they came into Elkington's hands has changed over the years.
Now, at this point, I think Dan is correct in responding. See, this is the problem with the sensationalists. Everyone says this is the greatest discovery for Christianity there is. No, that's bunk. It is not. Every time they do that, it destroys the archaeological value and the scholarly interest in stuff like this. So I'm on Dan's side on that score. But Dan has not done as thorough a study of the available evidence. He is picking and choosing the weakest people talking about these plates, these codices. Now, I'm not the only one to bring up this complaint about Dan's response videos. Neil over at Gnostic Informant also takes Dan to task much more severely than I'm going to tonight for Dan having the same problem. So yes, we love your videos. I absolutely love your biblical exegesis, but there really are actual real scholars with their videos and academic papers that you need to interact with instead of these types of sensationalists. That would be my honest advice. I'm just saying. Okay, let's keep going here.
They were immediately identified as forgeries by a number of professionals, classicists, philologists, epigraphers, archaeologists, and that has been the overwhelming consensus ever since Elkington came forward with them, partially aided by an Oxford classicist named Peter Thoneman, who emailed a bunch of colleagues immediately after Elkington went public and said, hey, this guy emailed me some photos a year ago of different plates that had iconography and inscriptions on them, and he asked me to authenticate them. And one of the inscriptions was clearly done by somebody who did not know Greek, because it was nonsensical, because they had confused the alpha and the lambda. And he was actually able to track down the origin of the inscription. Someone copied it off of a funerary inscription on display in a museum in Amman, Jordan, within the last few decades, but copied it incorrectly and then reproduced it on these plates. Now, that plate that Elkington had sent to Thoneman the year before was not included within the new cache of plates that Elkington released with this press release. So it's entirely a hoax. It is a forgery. Elkington is just trying to get power and money.
Now on.
All right, so let me explain a couple of items. I agree, Elkington is a charlatan. But Dan is doing a fallacy of an appeal to the authority of the group, of the consensus. And there has been a serious potential breakthrough with Samuel Zinner's scholarship showing some of these codices are encrypted codes dealing with Simon Bar Kokhba that Dan has not mentioned yet. This is not woo-woo forgery. It is encryption code for only those who have the key. Dan has not have that key, therefore the code locks him out of its meaning, and to him and the consensus it is gibberish, but their lack of ability to read this is not proof that it is gibberish and a forgery. That is a fallacious conclusion. That's dogma in place of data. Dan has not analyzed all of the available scholarly data yet, and it's easily available. Elkington is a charlatan, but this does not prove that all of the plates are forgeries. Dan is lumping them all together when they all have not been tested yet. They are being done so now. They are systematically being analyzed to this day, and breakthroughs to the code is happening, rendering many of these plates, codices, very coherent, meaningful, and historical. This data Dan has not utilized yet. And I agree that it's not about the Christians in the early Christian movement. That is fundamentally correct. I disagree that this means that they are all gibberish. They are not. Some are encrypted code for political safety reasons concerning the Simon Bar Kokhba movement, which was a very politically subversive era, as Samuel Zinner has shown, and I will leave the description of his research. And let me get to the next part of this, and I'll wrap it up here. All right, let me go back. All right, there, we'll get his full.
Present usually about a third to a half of all of the letters in the given scripts.
I'll go back to the beginning.
Just collections of letters, and a lot of the scripts are inconsistent. For one, they only represent usually about a third to a half of all of the letters in the given scripts. So they're not using near enough letters to be a comprehensible language, but they're mixtures of Nabatean and Old Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek and some nonsensical characters, and their orientations are switched, and they are inconsistent, and it is very clearly a forgery. Now, Elkington has claimed that a scholar
translated a part of one of these codices, and it says, I stand in perfection or something like that. And I've actually spoken directly with the scholar who promoted that translation, and he has asked not to be identified because he never wants to be associated with these things ever again in his life.
And I absolutely agree with this part of McClellan's take too. That translation is pure idiotic bunk. They're trying to sell the codices. The people who were involved with them did not grasp what they had, and they themselves made extra modern forgeries. But some of the ancient ones that have now gone through many, many tests for antiquity and have been shown to be ancient, including the script. Here's what I want to read. I agree that it's not about the Christians and it's not about the early Christian movement. This is very clearly and ironically dogmatic on Dan's part, however. All of these objections are answered by Samuel Zinner. None of these are by logical necessity pointing to forgery. The Enigma machine produced gibberish to the entire world of scholarship until Alan Turing broke the code. And then the Germans were defeated in the war. It was gibberish, but that's not proof that those messages were always gibberish. They were very meaningful to whoever had the key to the code. That is what some of these lead codices are, according to Zinner. Not all of them, but there are some that are genuine and authentic. So here's the issue. We moderns, we want the ancients to do things for our benefit. They've got to be our way or forget it. We're going to call them forgeries or fakes. We're going to impute bad motives to them. We're going to mock the idea that, well, these are encoded. Well, that's a cheap cop-out. Is it? It's done its job. It's kept profane eyes from what it really means, and they could pass messages back and forth between to each other in code and remain safe. I would say it's brilliant, and it was done anciently. These codices may be part of that aspect. We want them to use a single consistent script, or we'll say that it's all just gibberish. Well, they use different languages and stuff like that. Yeah, they do. That's what's keeping you from getting the point of them. But that's not proof that they're gibberish. This is where Dan gets dogmatic. There is another very scholarship approach based on decoding these, and the code, the decoding, is working. That's what's amazing. That's the power of the code. It doesn't have to be consistent with our standards. Right? That's why it works. So anyway, to us it's gibberish. But if Dan doesn't have the key to unlock the code, he'll never be able to read them. So that's an ugly note to end on, and I really don't want to, but I see everyone's going over to Mormon News Roundup now, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to end on a good note. For those of you who stuck with me, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. I'm going to end on a good note because I believe my information is very, very valuable. And so I'm going to continue sharing it. Here is my final. Let me stop this screen and I will share the screen again, and we will get to my final one. Oh, that's Genesis. Yeah, this is it. Genesis 1:1. Yeah, I've got to share this with you. This is Dan McClellan in its element. This is vintage Dan McClellan. This, to me, is what I wanted in church and was denied. And that's why I don't like going to church with Mormon, with the Mormon church. I'll never go there again. Oh, not that. There we go.
Proud of the craftsmanship and level of detail that go into
Hebrew Bible verse of the day, Genesis 1:1.
All right, let's see it.
Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et ha'aretz. In Hebrew, the prepositions are affixed to the beginning of the word. So, ba means in. Bereshit, in the beginning, coming from the Hebrew word rosh, meaning head or beginning.
Bereshit does not mean in the beginning. It means in the beginning of something because it is in the construct state. There are exactly 5 other occurrences of this exact construction. The bait preposition attached to the feminine singular construct form reshit, and every single occurrence is universally agreed to be in the construct and to be part of a temporal clause. Even the medieval French grammarian Rashi said that this is in the construct. It means in the beginning of something. If the authors wanted to say in the beginning, in the absolute state, they would have used the absolute state. It would say parishona, with the bait preposition, the definite article, and then the feminine singular absolute form, rishona. And that exact construction occurs about 20 other times in the Hebrew Bible. So Rashi continues, you've got to translate this as if bara, that follows, is not a finite verb, but an infinitive verb, baro. Now Rashi uses a plain A full spelling that adds a vav here, and we don't have that in the consonantal text of Genesis 1, but we don't need it, because you can have baro without the vav. You have that in Genesis 5:1, which is another temporal clause talking about the creation of the earth. And so we would just have to repoint the text. And because the vocalization of the text comes from the medieval period anyway, that's not really doing any damage to what the authors originally wrote. However, there are other scholars who argue that you can have a finite verb. It just has to be an unmarked relative clause. And here's a paper that discusses the grammar of that. So in the end, Genesis 1:1 is widely agreed these days not to say in the beginning, but in the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth, or more idiomatically in English, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. And then the verses that follow describe the state of affairs when the creative act actually began.
Yeah. Now this is the premium reason why I say the church, in their lazy learning theology of not teaching the Hebrew and the Greek, reading just the English translations, cannot possibly have the most accurate understanding of the scriptures. The English translations don't cut the mustard, not with the mother goddess, not with the creation. And McClellan here just really brings this home in a beautiful way. Let's keep going.
Bara means to create, and that's a word that's used only of God. Man can asa, make, or bana, build, but only God can bara, create out of nothing.
There are absolutely no data whatsoever that support the notion that bara refers specifically to creation out of nothing. And if you look at other occurrences of the verbal root bara, you will see they are referring to things that are definitely not creation out of nothing. The doctrine of creation out of nothing is agreed by scholars to have been developed in the late 2nd century CE within Christianity, in debate with Gnostics and other Greek thinkers about the morality of eternal matter and the rationality of the resurrection.
Right on. That is powerful. This is the other value of studying the Hebrew text, because we know in the original language that ex nihilo was nowhere near it. And in the English translation, if that's all you go on, then you can attempt to sneak your extra interpretation in on that, but that is not the ancient Jewish thought form. This is important. This is where people misunderstand the Bible falsely. Okay, Let's keep going.
Elohim is a plural noun. I'm not going to go into it in this video for time's sake, but this is evident that God is a plurality in unity.
This is evidence of absolutely no such thing whatsoever, and there are absolutely no data whatsoever that support this blithe retrojection of the Trinity into a time period when no such concept existed whatsoever. The grammatically plural word Elohim can mean plural gods or singular God, and it is used repeatedly throughout the Hebrew Bible to refer to single deities other than the God of Israel, such as Astarte and Baal and Asherah and Milcom and Chemosh and many others, because it's just the generic Hebrew word for God, and it can be used in the plural or in the singular. And if you'd like the best discussion of how this is, Joel Burnett's book, A Reassessment of Biblical Elohim, makes the best case, which is basically that this is a concretized abstract plural. And you can look at my video number, McClellan 1829, for a little more detail.
The Hebrew word et denotes a definite direct object. In this case, Hashemayim, the heavens, and Haaretz, the earth. Shemayim, heavens, is always plural. There's three of these. The first heaven is the sky, the atmosphere.
You notice how McClellan is systematically using Hebrew for absolutely every word and concept in the first part of Genesis, which is Genesis 1 and 1, because this particular understanding that this gentleman is elaborating, that is believed by millions, can't get any part of this right. This is quite remarkable. That's why I wanted to share this with you. This is McClellan helping us get on the right track with at least trying to understand the ancient Jewish concept. Not that you have to believe it, but at least understand it properly. You'll never get that in a translation of English. That's why I love studying the Hebrew. Truly.
Second heaven is the universe, and the third heaven is a spiritual realm where God dwells.
Shemayim has long been agreed by grammarians to be a plural of extension. It has nothing to do with describing multiple heavens. That is reading a much later cosmology back in to this mid-first millennium BCE text. It also directly contradicts the account within Genesis 1 that describes the heavens, the skies, the Shemayim, entirely and exclusively as the solid dome that was created to separate the waters below from the waters above that are suspended above by the Shemayim.
Yeah, this is really kind of cool because the actual word rakia, the word rakia in Hebrew, means hammered metal plate. So they visualize it as a metal dome. Now, they thought there for a while in the early 19th century that this had Babylonian influence, but through further archaeological materials and discoveries of different texts, they realized, well, no, the Babylonian parallels really don't fit the Hebrew, but the Mesopotamian ones did, interestingly enough, the earlier culture rather than the Babylonian. And this is a Mesopotamian concept, the solid heavens, the dome. And so that was the idea there. We're just about through this. Let's keep going.
And Haaretz, the earth, was created by God.
According to Genesis 1, the earth already existed when God began their creative act. It was in a state of what the Hebrew calls tohu vavohu, or mire and murk, and it was submerged under the chaotic waters of creation. But it already existed. The act of creation was to put it into a new state where it had form and function that aligns with how we understand the earth today.
If you'd like to learn Hebrew from me, you can click the link in the description.
No, I'm good.
Nah, I'm good. I love that. That is one of the coolest endings. I'm envious that he got to end a video like that. Nah, but this idea of the tohu vavohu, chaos, emptiness, and void is how the JPS, I believe, the Jewish Publication Society, of their understanding of the Hebrew. Yeah, but now Blake Ostler in his book, and that's the book I tried to find earlier, went upstairs. I thought I had it set out. in his book, God of God and the Gods, he shows how the Hebrew does show that there was already an earth when God began to create. And it's real interesting in the Hebrew. I was going to read a whole bunch of elaboration, though, but I've already gone way over. I'm at 2 hours. So thank you for sticking with me. It's always fun to come up with new stuff and share with you. McClellan is good at doing that periodically. I'm going to check out his stuff and review it. I will let you know when I agree. I will let you know when I disagree. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Share this video with others if you would, please. Leave comments on the video portion of this. This will automatically make it a video when you come and watch it. I will try to address some of your points and questions in another video, maybe. BYP responds to himself, to his own audience. That might be kind of fun, right? So anyway, I have been 2 hours at this. Thank you for sticking with me. This has been a lot of fun for me. I appreciate everybody in the chat. I know chat family is just so fun, isn't it? I appreciate that you guys have fun together too and talk about all kinds of fun stuff while I'm blathering on about idiot stuff. So this is fun. I will be back. Keep your eye out for my BYP response videos. I'm kicking those out, and my shorts. I am finding that people are finding Mormonism intriguing and interesting because its leaders are making it flail. And I know Mormons are really going to get after me for saying that, but I think there's evidence. So until next time, I love y'all, but I got to go. I'm going to get out of here. Oh, thank you, Latter Daily Digest. That makes my day. Keep your shorts hidden, shirts. Tessa, you rock. Debbie Donovan, you rock. Mike Moore, hey, good to see you, my brother. Coco B, good to see you too. You people are awesome. Thank you, Dan Vogel, for your comments. I saw them. I will address them. Tim Rathbone, good to see you. As always, Tim, you're one of the anchors, man. You are the man. So, yes, Zinner is accepted by the consensus. He is the real deal. Absolutely. And I will show that in the description in the link. Yep. And I've got some videos that I will share with you also, fundamentally so. Yeah, I'll share links of the information on the Jordan Lead Codices with you. You can come back to this video. Please hit the like button and then follow those links. I'll be happy to do that for you. It's an ongoing investigation. Dan McClellan wants to shut the door on it as forgeries. No bother to look any further. I completely disagree with that assessment, even though I agree with him on so many of the coming up to the Jordan Lead Codices context. There were charlatans and idiots at play for money. That's fundamentally true. But further light and knowledge that archaeology and scholarship promised has now shown up, and I'm calling for a reassessment. So, all right, you guys, I got to run. Thank you for everything.